Man, I'm really gonna miss Sting. While watching AEW's Revolution pay-per-view, it kinda hit me that this is the last time we're gonna see Sting wrestle, and it got me in my feels a little bit, But I quickly returned to my critical thinking mind and started thinking, well, now that his career is over, where does Sting rank among the great wrestlers in the history of professional wrestling? And after thinking about it a little bit, I came to the sudden and swift conclusion that he's actually one of the greatest of all time. That when people mention the top 5s and top 3s, he should be in those lists. But to my surprise, when you listen to a lot of the wrestling community, whether it is former wrestlers or wrestling fans or media personalities or whatever, not that many of them actually mention Sting among those lists of the greatest of all time. And it kind of shocked me. So I decided today to actually make the case once and for all why Sting actually is indeed one of the greatest of all time. You see, to start, we need to make some rules here. To be one of the greatest of all time in terms of professional wrestling, you have to acquire 3 important characteristics, 3 important criterias you have to check to actually enter the list of the greatest of all time. The first one is having a character and a gimmick, a shtick that people actually like and love. Number 2 is being actually good in the ring. I'm not necessarily saying that you have to be great or extremely technical, you just have to be good and not bad. And number 3 is having memorable moments that people look back into fondly. So yeah, these are the 3 criterias in my humble opinion that if you check all of them, you kinda have a right to claim your spot in the greatest of all time debate. So let's run the gauntlet on Sting and see how he fares in these 3 criteria. The first one, the character and gimmick, goes without explaining that it's actually very important. It's what genuinely gets you over with the fans. And the way I look at it, the more you can change and renovate yourself entirely and embrace a new character and extremely excel at it, the better you are. Because you could be just great at one layer of a character. Maybe you're the dramatic guy, maybe you're the good guy, maybe you're the bad guy, maybe you're the outlaw, the anti-authorities and whatever. But if you can do all of those things at separate times in your career, that is interesting. And one of the big examples that comes to mind is obviously Chris Jericho. His ability to actually renovate himself so well to the point that there's an entire generation of wrestling fans that don't know or did not know the Lion Tamer, Chris Jericho. All they knew was the cold-blooded, heartless, suit-wearing Chris Jericho. And to be honest, I was one of those people. I never knew the Lion Tamer. I never knew that ever existed in the history of professional wrestling. And other than Chris Jericho, I do believe Sting is one of those people. I mean, think about it. He started as the Surfer Sting. The clear-cut, white babyface guy in the 1990s. And he embodied that era of babyface, of screaming and yelling at the interviewer, whoever the interviewer was. And then came Crow Sting, which in my humble opinion is one of the best characters of all time. It's up there with The Undertaker. And he was unbelievably cool in his run in 1997, to be honest. And he completely embodied it because, again, think back to the fact that he used to be Surfer Sting, the guy who screamed and yelled. Now he doesn't do that at all. That's not easy. And then came the NWO Sting, which, I like to think that never happened. But even with the NWO Sting, we managed to see a different layer of Sting. Because the last time we saw him talking before Crow Sting, he was just screaming and yelling in his promos. But now, we kind of see a different layer to him. We kind of see him actually cutting interesting, somewhat thought-provoking promos and some comedic flair, to it. And then he comes back as Crow Sting and continues all the way to TNA. And then we see the Joker Sting, which I know a lot of people didn't like Joker Sting, but I really think he did a phenomenal job portraying that. I really believe that when he portrayed Joker Sting, he embodied and lived up that character so well. It's not necessarily that the best character for him, because he is Sting. He used to be the stoic, cold, calm guy. But like I said, I do believe that he did the best he could with it. And then we get, obviously, the one thing that I left out was obviously Mafia Sting, which I don't think that much of it. I think it was more like Sting just being himself, and it was reported that he didn't like it at all because he didn't want to be a heel. Maybe he had some PTSD from being, in the NWO many years ago. I don't know, but that was the case. That's why I left it as the last. But as you can clearly see here, in terms of character and gimmicks and renovating herself, he really excelled and did incredibly well throughout his entire career in making himself different and standing out from everyone else. Now, in terms of wrestling abilities, most of us have recency bias and remember him maybe from TNA, his cup of coffee at WWE, or his latest run with AEW. But if you really want to see how good Sting used to be, all you have to do is go back to the early 1990s and late 1980s and see how good he truly was in his prime. Prime Sting was something to be watched. He carried WCW in those times. In those times, WCW, to be honest, before the whole Monday Night Wars thing, was known in the wrestling community to be the wrestling haven, as opposed to WWF, more entertainment-leaning wrestling product. And Sting was at the forefront of that. If you don't believe me, just watch his matches against Ric Flair, Vader even. All of them stellar and amazing matches. So again, in terms of in-ring abilities, he's really, really good, and he definitely checks that box. And finally, the moments. I mean, there are many to count, to be honest. When he first became world champion in WCW, the whole 1997 run against NWO, where it was essentially him alone against the entire faction, the most dominant faction at that time, and one could even make the argument ever. And it was actually believable. His aura was real. He genuinely felt like a superhero, someone akin like Batman. And to prove that point, that it's not just me saying that, their pay-per-view between Sting and Hulk Hogan at Starrcade 97 became the most selling pay-per-view in the history of that company, just because of the aura of Sting and obviously Hulk Hogan. And then coming back to WWE, where hell genuinely frozen over. No one ever thought that he would ever come to WWE, but after all these years, he managed to do so. So that was a moment in itself. And then we look at obviously his entire run at AEW, which was in itself incredible and filled with moments after moments of just sheer brilliance. So yes, in terms of moments, he has a lot of, space in our minds. So when you look at his career, he had a character and a gimmick that is incredibly interesting and engaging and got over with the fans. His work in the ring is stellar. His moments are memorable. So why the hell are we not mentioning him among the greatest of all time? So yeah, Sting should definitely be one of the greatest of all time. And for you, Sting, for everything that you have provided us, the moments, the memories, the things that we will never forget, we, in large, thank you.
You fucking mark!